Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz, and this is BattleCry. BattleCry is a casual player versus player strategic war game. The platforms of choice for this particular game are the iOS operating system, that's iPhone, tablets, and phones, including the Android operating system, tablets, and phones. The target demographic are young men between the ages of 14 and 21, although through testing we're seeing that it's really kind of gender neutral, and as far as the youth concerns, the young closer to the age of 14, it appeals to both females and males. The game itself, the soundbite for BattleCry is hordes don't summon themselves, battlecries do. The premise behind the game is you're a young upstart barbarian and you're expected to expand your world and do battles with other barbarians, and you do so with a voice mechanic, your voice screaming and performing battle cries to summon your horde. The inspiration being the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons barbarian class, which has the ability to summon a barbarian horde for a particular purpose. So we're using the voice mechanic as a way to do that. In addition to that, the real driving force behind using the player's voice was to find a way to vest the player into the game with something that they are. In this particular case, digitizing their voice and using their voice in such a way that it's a learned behavior mechanic, something that I can introduce and perfect and master by the way I leverage my battle cry. I can get more predictable results. So it's a skill, very much like agility or intelligence, that I can hone in the game. So we're going to go ahead and log in. This is the title screen. So I already have an account, but you can create a brand new account and start a new account to play with. If you have an account, you can log in with this account. This allows a single device to be used by multiple players, which we think would be particularly of interest for young audiences. In the background, the entire architecture behind this is sitting on Azure. We're using Azure SQL Services as the data store. The architecture is abstracted from the data model using XML and stored procedures to access the middle layer using the web services, using the services architecture app of Azure to serve up data from SQL Server to the application. We are using Unity to manage and build the UI, and it uses a asynchronous method for doing RESTful calls out to the Azure API service layer to request data in a very basic read and write service methodology. As the player comes in, they're presented with a series of menus. The game as it stands right now is extremely close to the game design document, or the document as it was originally designed. We have not deviated very much. There's been minor course corrections for improvement, labeling, and that sort of thing. But for the most part, reviewing the game design document is how you see it. Now, that's how it was developed out. As we've gone through testing, we've identified opportunities for improvement. So the standard is I come here to create a new game, and bear with me, I'm going to go ahead and create a battle cry. This is a battle cry, and you can see that it shows my voice, replays it, and then breaks it up into the three parts using the FFT algorithm. And the FFT algorithm allows us to see, frequency over magnitude, which is just a better way of looking at the sound wave instead of over time, giving us a sense of power and strength on those three segments for those three different types of units, which is infantry, cavalry, and archery. Upon creating a new game, it goes to the pending list. Now, again, breaking away from the ideal scenario, this was as designed, but we found that during testing, this was a very confusing architecture. So pending and open games, pending games being games I've created waiting for players to join. Open games are games that other players have created waiting for people to join. So from an ideal standpoint, changes that are going to be implemented into the final production version is the player is going to create a new game, and either they're targeting a specific player, either from the friends list or the high score list, where I can challenge directly a player using the BattleCry button, or if I'm just creating a new game in this fashion, It'll do a search through the available listed players, look at their ranking, and try to match you as evenly as possible to a player and just randomly assign that game. Now, once that occurs, that game will show up in that player's pending list, but the goal here is to get the player into the game as quickly as possible. I just created a game, but I can't go into this new game right here until someone joins it. With the ideal system is I'll create the game, be able to go directly into the game, make my turns, and if the player chooses not to play, then the game just goes away. If they do play, then the other player can, in their pending, issue their challenge, their battle cry, and then go in and make their turns. The other option is that the game just shows up on the player's active list and they can just go in and play with no need to do another battle cry. So we're still working out the mechanics in that piece. But the overall objective is to reduce the number of lists to potentially I can create a new game, I can look at my completed games, and I have access to my active games so I can get in really quickly. Another mechanic in the game is the arena, so I can come in here, and the arena is just a safe place to kind of test my battle cry so that I can attack certain areas. This is me attacking this area. And again, I get to see my battle cry attacking this area. I get to hear my battle cry replayed. I get to see it broken down into the two pieces, and then I get to see how those numbers for the attackers form out. So I ended up, basically summoning a horde of 407 infantry, 419 cavalry, and 230 archeries, and then I can fight. In the arena, I can just continue to advance, adding an item. It's really just a play test and work on my battle cry mechanics. As you can see, even from the hex I just did, I can go ahead and attack surrounding territories, and it pre-selects it so you can move through. And it's just a play area. There's really no benefit to the player other than just practicing their mechanic. So as we get into the game itself, you'll notice these little icons, so let me click on that.
Number 5.
And again, the goal here with the voice mechanic is to engage the player and get the player feeling like they're part of the game with their voice, and then having the ability to hear the opponent's battle cry by pushing on the audio icons gives me that sense that I'm playing another player, not just a computer or some faraway person. And within the game itself, as you're moving around and doing combat, which we'll show in a second, you're constantly exposed to your opponent's battle cry as they're attacking things, as you're exploring the map. So you really get a sense of this head-to-head experience that's a little richer than just fighting another intellect on the other side of the map. I'm actually hearing their battle cry and seeing the result of their information. But before we go into a game, let's sort of explore the interface a bit. So the gear in the top right hand corner is the settings. So I have the ability to change my display name. Understandably, there's a potential for abuse on a BattleCry system, so you have the ability to silence the other player if you think that the abuses are a little too egregious. You can replay the tutorial. The tutorial is another area that we're probably going to switch up and do more of a spoon feeding rather than here's a bulk tutorial at the beginning that you have to remember. You can delete the account and of course log out to allow another player to log in. Credit screen, fairly self-explanatory. This is the in-game shop. This is another area where it's going to deviate. Right now you start with 5 game slots. This particular player logged in has unlimited, you can see from the sheer number of active games. And you can purchase extra game slots to be playing multiple games at the same time. The investors that have already been introduced to this game are looking for concepts such as heirlooms, artifacts that I can use once a day on any game that cross the game boundary. There's an in-game shop, we'll see that in a minute, where you can buy buffs and things. So they want something that will carry with the account. The ability to create audio skins, so I can buy a sort of a scrambler for my battle cry that makes it sound deeper, makes it sound higher, and I can purchase those and I can choose to apply those. Now that doesn't affect the outcome of my battle cry. The results in summoning is the same, but just the way it's played to the other player would be different. So they think that that would be a very engaging way to do the shopping and encourage people to buy things. And additionally, we're going to add ad revenue in here as a startup, since it's a sort of a free-to-play type of game. Then there's the high scores list, where you can keep up with where you are in the rankings and again have the ability to challenge. One of the great things about the high score list, Xander hasn't actually done anything. Let's see about Hearthdale. Let's click on him.
For the Horde.
So in combat, the last battle cry for Hearthdale was for the Horde, as you could hear. So this gives you the ability to see what the latest battle cry is for that player. So if you're following or keeping up with a player, and you can do the same thing on the friends list, you can listen to what your friend's last battle cry is and kind of see the output and the results to it. We're going to be changing a little bit. I'll play this again.
For the Horde.
So where you're seeing the FFT transforms at the bottom, we're going to include the numbers so that as not only can I hear their battle cry, but I can also see the result of their battle cry. And again, kind of learning from your friends or learning from other players to see how their battle cries are resulting against your battle cry. So as we go into the game is basically an 8x8 map. You can just swipe around and explore. And each one of these little hexes, if I take this, you can hear as I pick on enemy sectors or neutral sectors that I don't own, it'll automatically play the battle cry for that sector. So if me and my opponent are fighting over that sector back and forth, I can see and hear what their last battle cry was and what they did to that particular cell. Down here in the bottom far right where it looks like a newspaper, I can click on that and I can see all the histories. This is an older one, so it doesn't have any history. Let's click up here to a newer one.
Blah, 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 blah.
And as you can see, this one has some history to it, so it's a first attack, and it gives me some details on what happens. And as the cell switches back and forth, or if there are multiple failed attempts, I can kind of see a full docket of everything that has happened, and if I needed to,
blah, 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 blah,
I can replay that battle cry at each one of those historical moments in the game. So as you're exploring the map and looking for
the Horde,
the particular cells have various value. So this sector is worth 3 resources, and depending on the amount of sectors that you own, whether you own a mountainous area, it will basically add up to your income. So as you can see down here in the little bag with arrows going into it, I'm generating 53 resources a turn, and I currently have 64 resources in the bank on my turn. And this is critical for the in-game economy for upgrading and purchasing. So I have a level 4 dwarf, only have a level 1 elf, a knight, and a troll. These particular heroes can be applied to a combat. They're available to be used once per turn, and they can assist you in a particularly difficult hex battle that you're trying to take. They add buff points to the battle itself. So I can just click here and say, yep, let me up level my elf, and my elf is now a 2nd level elf. And if I needed to do something in forests, not only am I up buffing my units, I'm creating a negative or a debuff against units in forest, so my opponent. Similar to that are the buffs themselves, so I can get flaming arrows. These are consumable, and during combat I can pick up to 3 buffs that I want to include in a combat. I don't have enough resources for that, but they have to be unique. Excuse me. They have to be unique resources. So I can't have 2 flaming arrows, but I can have a flaming arrow, a flying mountain, and a heroism. So another one of the things that's going to evolve as this goes into production is we're going to add a lot more buffs and a lot more heroes to give a little more depth of action as far as the in-game economy is concerned. So one of the things that you can do is you can buff a particular area. So as you can see, I have a wall, so I can say select that and apply that to that sector. So now this sector, as you can see down here with the green star, has a wall that's protecting it. So I can have up to 3 defensive buffs, and then if I go into a combat scenario, that one's already attacked. Let's see if I can find one that hasn't attacked. Alright, so if I go into a combat scenario, let's say I want to attack that cell, I can attack it. I can click on my buffs and I can say I want to include flaming arrows and flying mounts. So I'm used 2 of my 3 and apply those to combat. Using planes, so I have a knight. I'm going to select a knight because they're good on planes and apply that to combat. Then I'm going to go into combat. Rah, 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 rah. Included my battle cry. That's a pretty respectable battle cry. And I can begin to do combat. As you see the different colored X's, those are the buffs and heroes and terrain buffs kicking in to help me win that battle. So I've now won that battle. Those buffs that I used were consumed. That hero is also consumed. So there's quite a bit here on the map, but essentially the goal and the objective is to march over and take my opponent's castle, whereby winning the game. That is BattleCry in a nutshell. Again, all of these systems are real-time and they're cross-platform, so Android and iOS users can play together. It's 100% player versus player, except for the arena, in which you're just beating up the neutral guys that already exist in those territories, and you can march all the way across to the other guy's castle and eventually win the arena, and then you just go back and start over. The elements for the networking and the database are all Azure-based. They're secure from an HTTPS standpoint, so the channels are encrypted, and it's a very lightweight, RESTful interface for a read-write service of data, heavily leveraging XML services just as a force multiplier. Long term, the game's going to be a little bit simpler to use as far as the menuing system. On in-game, one of the key things that we're going to change is that rather than having to pick the cell that you're starting with and then pick the opponent cell that you want to attack, we're going to give the player the ability to just simply pick or target the cell that they want to attack, and then it spoon feed them through. Because we found that the mechanic is a little confusing for users. And the other problem that we have is down here in the lower left hand corner where it currently says buff, and then I pick an opponent and it currently says attack. The command buttons are too far away from the focus of the player. So we're going to move those up into the map area so that the player, as they're clicking the map, are being given directions on what to do, where to go. If I just click this, do you want to buff it, or do you want to attack? You want to attack, select another hex. If they're selecting the other hex to start with, it'll work the other way and allow them to decide, okay, well, where is your attack coming from? And then very similar to these little icons, it'll help drive the player better to know what they're supposed to do. With those two aspects, the simplification of the lists and the simplification of the combat system, we think that'll get us over the hump on the last two areas of concern that the playtesting has exposed. And generally, it's a well-received game. We see players really kind of enjoying themselves. They're a little tentative as a first-time player screaming into their phone, but once they get that feedback from the other player, then it becomes sort of immediately socially acceptable, and they're completely engaged in the game, and their level of play and fun just shoots through the roof. So it's going to be very exciting. I hope you enjoyed this screencast, and I look forward to showing you the finished product very quickly. Thank you.